Today on Owl Have You Know.
When I saw the results and started talking to our user base, both on the encouragement receiver side and the sender side, that I knew that this was not a project that we were just going to see what happens. For me, it was a point of no return.
Welcome back to Owl Have You Know. This is your host, David Droogleever. I'm on the line here with Charley Donaldson. Charley is a Rice MBA class of 2009, the professional program, and also the CEO of Donation Scout and CaringBand. So serial entrepreneur here. So I'm sure there's a great story to unpack. So first and foremost, Charley, thank you for coming on to Owl Have You Know.
Thank you, David, for having me. I appreciate it. Look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. And you have a lot to talk about. And so we can harbor cruise things or deep dive. So why did you choose to go to Rice? Why did you get your MBA? Can you talk us through that journey and how that impacted your life going forward?
Sure, absolutely. So let's see, way back when, 2007 is when I started my MBA career. And I guess before that, made the decision with my wife that that was going to be a part of the journey that was important for us. And at the time, my background was largely in finance. I had spent, let's see, at that time, about 5 years, mostly in investment banking. And what I became really interested in along the way was investment management and investing. The Rice MBA program was really a way for me to hone those skills from an academic perspective and really put myself in a great position to really career switch, if that makes sense. And that's absolutely what it did.
So you wanted to hone your skills in finance and banking and also change the trajectory of your career as well. Did that switch involve, say, going deeper into finance or completely just jettisoning the finance background for something completely different?
Right. So at the time, my focus was in finance and in capital markets. So in hindsight, I have a lot of regret in that because I didn't, take, Napier's class and other entrepreneurship classes that so many of my alumni friends rave about over the years. So I was, in the right fund. I was taking, fixed income simulation, everything and anything finance, capital markets. I would take. In fact, my second year, I really went almost full time. There were several electives during the day that I wanted to take and made a decision to kind of go part time at my current job so that I could do that. And that was really all for putting myself in the best position to really career switch the way I wanted to. And so after I graduated in 2009, I went to work for JP Morgan's private bank, where I spent the next 5 years managing money for wealthy and ultra high net worth individuals.
Sounds like a blast. I actually ran away from finance as quickly as possible. I mean, I love money as much as the next, Rice MBA person. And also, it's like, oh, interesting. So this can fund a lot of other interesting endeavors and efforts. So clearly, that ended up leading to your starting your own company. So, what was that decision process like when you eventually left finance and JP Morgan? And what were you thinking about? What was your thought process when you wanted to start your own companies?
For so long, I had kind of put myself in the finance capital markets bucket rather, and it was really over that 5 year period at JP Morgan where I realized that and a career in investment sales or any of the other areas that I spent time in really wasn't going to be the thing that makes me fulfilled from a career perspective, and and really that's when kind of the entrepreneurial itch really started to get stronger, over that period of time, and almost to the point where I felt like in that really that last year, I you know, it produced so much anxiety just knowing that I wasn't where I needed to be. And that's really what kinda got the wheels turning in terms of, going out on my own. And really at the time, I didn't have an idea or a business in mind that I wanted to pursue. It was just, I knew I needed to be out there on my own, and really the first way I did that was still somewhat related to what I had been doing. I actually created an investment advisory, company that I still am involved in. Um, and really that wasn't my entrepreneurial thing, right? That wasn't going to, scratch the itch, but it was an easy way for me to step out into the world, um, into the entrepreneurial world with some risk mitigation, if you will. And so the hope there was, that I would, one, continue to work with interesting people that were doing interesting and entrepreneurial things, but also have capacity to explore some ideas of my own. And that's what ultimately led to, two startups that I spend, the vast majority of my time on right now, Donation Scout and CaringBand, both in the technology space, which, you know, you know, we just talked about my kind of financial background and focus for the prior 10 years. So being kind of a tech entrepreneur certainly came out of left field and not something that I had ever envisioned myself. But now being, several years into it, it's absolutely where I needed to be.
Yeah, I have a lot to ask about that. One of the things that comes up is the skill sets that were evolving and maturing and refactoring throughout this process. So the skills that are needed for finance clearly are different than standing up a company or even an advisory company, and then various entrepreneurial activities. So what did the evolution of your skills look like, and were there some skills that were maybe unexpectedly tapped into as you started to start your own companies and do your own ventures outside of big corporate, that perhaps surprised you, or maybe you thought, man, if only I could have used this skill before, maybe that could have changed a lot of things for the better?
I guess from the skill that I really never, I'd say, knew was there. Never got a chance to really exercise while in, the various, finance careers that I was in. Was really on the creative side, right? I mean, and that also goes with, working, in large corporations. While there's certainly job functions that do get to express that creativity, I never felt like I was in one of those, and so that's something I get to do on a daily basis now, and I've learned that I'm actually pretty good at it. And so now, you know, had I understood that and was able to do that in finance, I don't know if that would have changed anything. I'm pretty sure it would not have. Um, but I think that I draw more from that experience, over that kind of 10-year period, from a leadership perspective, in the various companies that I worked with. I tended to climb through the ranks, pretty quickly and managed people, you know, a, a, as part of that. That's been helpful, obviously, in starting companies from scratch. Also with just relationship building, within the wealth management space. That's really a lot of what we did, and that's something that I do on a daily basis, whether it's with Donation Scout or Caring Band. It's earning the trust, through the stakeholders and, strategic partners and potential customers that we're talking to on a daily basis. And that's something that I felt like I came into this world with a pretty sharp skill set on how to do that effectively.
That's fascinating. I really geek out on trust because just being in sales or building my own projects and just seeing the business world, the power of building trust is so, it's, gosh, it is so key, and all solid relationships are built upon that. So I definitely want to hear more about that with Donation Scout and Caring Band. To my understanding, of course, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, and these are very it's focused on the community or the community building aspect. nonprofits, helping people to feel better. So, in your own words, Charley, what is the value proposition? And you can pick either one or deep dive into one if you want. But what is the value proposition for either Caring Band or Donation Scout?
Really, the mission of CaringBand is to maximize the frequency of encouragement for anyone going through a difficult time. And we do that by providing that person's network an easy way for them to let them know just how often that they come across their mind. And so, I know we've talked a little bit about CaringBand, but just for the listeners, so CaringBand is a emotional support platform, and it combines a wearable, which is a Bluetooth connected, just simple notification bracelet that pulses and lights up anytime an encouraging message is received on the CaringBand app. And so on the app, that person's network or virtual support network, if you will, within just a couple of taps on their smartphone, they can send preset messages like "I'm thinking of you" or "I love you" or "I'm praying for you," and do that as often as that person comes across their mind.
I think when people think about wearables, they think of their Apple Watch or their Fitbit, something like that that can maybe measure physical activity. It's focused on pretty much you for the most part. And so the obvious question here is, where did the idea for carrying bands come out of? Did it solve a problem that you were working through, or someone that was in your orbit? Like, how did the inspiration for this land on you?
Yeah, so it was actually my wife's idea, and it was really on the back of her mother's battle with cancer, thankfully a successful one. And through that experience, my wife Lindsay just realized that going through that, there wasn't a way for her to let her mom know just how often she came across her mind. And of course, they would call and she would text, and they would communicate in traditional ways, and she would do that pretty often. But but they weren't, from a frequency standpoint, nothing compared to the amount of times that her mom crossed her mind. And she just thought that there should be an easy way for her mom to know just how often she's thought about and how much she's loved. And that was really how Caring Band came to be. And frankly, when Lindsay told me about the idea, I immediately got it and I understood it. But I was like, look, there is absolutely um, no way that we are suited to really bring this idea to life. And so, for the next several weeks, if not more, I kind of was crossing my fingers, hoping she would forget about the idea. But I'm so thankful that Lindsay pushed me to kind of get off zero and start having conversations, which is kind of the first step. I started talking to people in my network, a lot of my Rice friends who were technologists and who had done things like this. They ultimately got me comfortable with the idea that we could actually pull it off. And so what Lindsay and I committed to doing is putting out a proof of concept, or we actually did a little bit more. We kind of went, we put out a really nice MVP, or minimum viable product, both on the wearable side and the app. For me, that was still, hey, we committed to doing this, and where it goes, who knows? But it was still very much, a wait and see kind of thing for me personally. It wasn't until we launched our first beta test in 2019, the summer of 2019, where for me, when I saw the results and started talking to our user base, both on the encouragement receiver side and the sender side, that I knew that this was not a project that we were just going to see what happens. It for me, it was a point of no return. And so really since then, I've been committed to bringing Caring Band to life. And so that anyone that needs that extra emotional support going through a difficult time, can have access to a higher frequency.
Be silly to not touch on how COVID and the pandemic has potentially brought this or impacted this project. Even folks close to me had spent days or weeks in quarantine floors in the hospital, or going through surgeries or pregnancies where no one else can be close to them. So, is there a story there that you could share or otherwise point to some examples where carrying band was made that much more impactful because of, say, having to quarantine or any other kind of similar situation like that?
Absolutely. I mean, there have been dozens of stories that we've heard directly from our user base, from them personally and their families, over the last, several months. One of which comes to mind was, this was back in the spring of this year, where a little boy was kind of battling for his life and in the hospital. And as we all know, the COVID protocols, or have heard of them, a lot of times, you can't have any visitors. For that case, they did allow a parent to be there, but you know, in terms of the people that could be with him, um, certainly was restricted due to COVID. And so, over about a 3-week period, his mom did a phenomenal job of rallying troops on her social platforms, and so he had about 700, and it was almost 750 people downloaded the app, the CaringBand app, to support him. And over a course of a 3.5-week period, he received over 6,000 encouraging messages on the CaringBand platform. And actually, after that first week of him coming on board, which immediately got my attention, because I see when the carrying bands are connected to the platform, and I can see the downloads that happen as a result of that, and I can see who's sending the messages. So this user experience caught my attention because we had never had that virality, or we'd never seen that virality before in carrying band. And I was really thankful that his mom reached out to me about a week into their journey, and asked to talk on the phone. And so I actually had the opportunity to speak with the mom and the child while they're in the hospital, and it was a great conversation. They, obviously it's great hearing from people that are using your product and that are telling you how much they love it. But it was also a great session for them to give feedback, which was hugely valuable. And so that's one of many experiences that keep me going every day. As you can imagine, startups are hard, and hardware startups are even harder, I think. And so there's lots of peaks and valleys, and but when I get into a valley that's more prolonged than I'd like, I think about those stories, and thinking about how impactful that the Caring Band platform is and continues to be for families like the one I just mentioned.
That's an amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. And on going back to the mission, and this last question on carrying bands, and gosh, I really wish this we had a couple more hours here, but last question on carrying band is, the mission with inside of maximizing frequency of encouragement for anyone going through a difficult time, as you said, that's obviously, pretty broad market. I mean, it's pretty much the entire planet essentially. So what's the sort of magic wand future state of carrying band? Where would you like to see carrying band, if you just pulled out your magic wand and said blick and was able to get this out to the world? What does that look like for you?
I think long term, I would love Caring Band to be synonymous with encouraging others, and and even a platform that goes away from, when people think about Caring Band right now, they think about the Caring Band, the actual physical band. But when we came up with the idea of the Caring Band name and brand, it was really more of a band of support, like a band of brothers. And so that's when I think about Caring Band is going beyond the healthcare space and those that are in hospitals. I think that will always be a focus, and we always want to do justice by that user base. But I think it's like, to your point, who doesn't need extra encouragement, right? And if there was a way for us to help change behaviors of those like us, that, like, I think about, I think about so many people in my life on a daily basis that I don't let them know, because of a lot of different reasons. But if there was a way, through something like the Caring Band platform, that, if I'm, I've got a, a free second and I've got my phone with me, which I always do, most like everyone else. Um, and with a touch of a button, I can let that person know that, hey, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. Right. And so I think long term, it would be super cool if CaringBand could kind of penetrate that market of that broad user base of just that extra medium of of emotional support.
Love that. I would have to switch gears, I think, at this point to Donation Scout. And so, maybe we sort of go through this expeditiously, but this one is a little less intuitive to me just because I haven't been in the restaurant or fundraising space. So, similar question with Donation Scout, what was the source of inspiration or the pain that was being solved? And what's sort of the state of the union, in terms of how you help with fundraising and restaurants and community building.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So Donation Scout's a very different project than CaringBand, but one I'm also passionate about, and it comes from solving a problem that I experienced firsthand in the restaurant industry. One of the kind of entrepreneurial things I've done over the last 7 years is in the restaurant space. We had some ownership in several restaurants in Houston. And we were trying to do something extremely difficult, which was bring a new concept into a major market like Houston, Texas. And, as probably most of the listeners are from Houston, that from a restaurant consumer standpoint, it's phenomenal, right? I mean, there's restaurant options, galore. And so that makes it really nice from a consumer standpoint, but it's really difficult from an operator standpoint because there's so much competition. And so restaurants are constantly looking for ways to differentiate. And one of the ones that we really focused on was community involvement, right? We wanted to increase our awareness in the community as a fundraiser-friendly restaurant and a restaurant that gives back. So we started doing these spirit nights or give back nights, which are pretty common. It's not anything new. They've been around for decades, but we started doing those and working with elementary school PTOs and high school bands and churches and little leagues and things like that. And that was a really great way for us to, one, introduce ourselves to the community, and also and give back. But also, it's a great business. I mean, it's a great revenue generator, right? You're bringing in new feet through the door. Those opportunities a lot of times are turning into catering. So it is really a win-win, and it's kind of the holy grail in terms of marketing because it doesn't cost you anything and you can see the ROI. The problem is it's really difficult to scale those initiatives without technology. One of the things my wife helped with was managing our kind of fundraiser program across our locations. And that involved email, text, with these volunteers and going back and forth on scheduling and things like that, and helping them with marketing, creative flyers and lots of administrative things. And so ultimately, when we really decided to make this a bigger initiative to where we were trying to do multiple events a week, at each of our locations, there was no way to do it without technology. So I had a longtime friend of mine who is a brilliant full stack developer put together a prototype for me so that we could use in our restaurants. And it ended up being such a robust prototype, probably even beyond prototype. We started to talk to others in my network in the restaurant industry, and all that said, we decided to make a go at it as an enterprise software startup. And so our value proposition there with Donation Scout is we help restaurants scale their community fundraiser efforts. So we eliminate virtually all of the administrative burden. We help restaurants manage the entire process from scheduling through reminder emails, calendar invites, automated marketing flyer generation. um, we even help them facilitate payment. So restaurants, they don't have to write checks or cut checks that go to these organizations. They can actually pay online through our platform. And so it's been a really great experience. We've been working on this for a couple of years. um, Unfortunately, the backdrop of the COVID environment and what that's done to the restaurant industry has been somewhat of a headwind, but we're thankful that we've got several brands that have trusted us to power their fundraiser community platforms, and it's really starting to work now that the COVID trends are cooperating, and restaurants are finding ways to work around that. They're going back and they're really focusing on, a lot of them are refocusing on community involvement, and we're happy to help them do that at scale.
You got ahead of me. I was going to ask what some of the challenges were, but that was a well articulated one. And the other thing, as I was listening to you, you're making me want to start a restaurant. Because it makes owning a restaurant, operating one, so much more synergized with the community and what they're going about doing. It's not just about serving food, but it's about connecting people. So I absolutely love that. So to kind of pivot and maybe try to bring everything together, I think one of the things that folks might be asking about is, okay, you have two different companies. You still have your advisory company going. So how do you think about, as an entrepreneur, how do you think about prioritizing this portfolio of efforts and companies that you're running and relationships that you're building? How do you think about that going forward, where you put your energy, time, and focus? Do you, do you just keep muscling in and putting in more effort? Do you hire people? Do you, outsource some stuff? How do you go about interweaving your efforts in these various projects now and going forward?
Yeah, honestly, David, I mean that's something I think about constantly, and I
Mm.
try to have routine, honest conversations with myself on when is it time to outsource myself. right right now right now I feel like I'm not spreading myself too thin. I'm not dropping any balls, and really in startup land, um, the founders need to do things that don't scale, right? You need to, do the experiments. Like, for example, with Donation Scout, I'm experimenting on lots of different, types of, sales strategies, and what's going to fill the pipeline, more efficiently. And I feel like once that is determined, then I can start hiring, a sales force and a customer success folks that can articulate that strategy. But right now, I feel like it's more prudent for me, to walk those experiments through. And I believe it's more fruitful because no one tells the story like I do. No one has more passion in the project than I do. And so I feel like the way I'm spending my time is prudent. And then the same thing with CaringBand. I'm pretty confident there's going to come a day where um, I cannot do justice by either or both of these concepts in terms of their full potential as products, right? And that's when I need to take a back seat and either hire that person or persons that can do justice, um, and be there as as a shepherd or guide, however you want to call it. But knowing when it's time to kind of step aside or tap others for help, I think is something, hugely important with all founders, and something that I'm very mindful of.
I may have to pick your brain on that here just around the corner. So final couple points here. Definitely want to give some time for call to action and maybe I'll have moment or factoid you'd like to share that maybe you haven't shared before. Charlie, how would you like folks that are tuning in to uh, either learn more about Donation Scout or Carrying Bands or just you personally? How can folks connect with you or otherwise support your mission?
LinkedIn's probably the best way. I'd love to connect with anyone that has interest in either companies or just um, would like to talk about my journey. Or I'm I think one of the things that I've gotten a lot better over the years is genuine networking, and I love talking to other entrepreneurs. That's something that I would do every day of the week if I could. And so, yeah, I welcome any conversations and any connections in that regard. Um, I would say, from an ask standpoint, in the long term for CaringBand, it needs to be a funded company, and that's something we've kind of relied, so far on bootstrapping some friends and family, um, and I think what I would welcome is anyone kind of in this audience that would have the ability to make connections or advice on, okay, this is CaringBand today. um, what does it look like to be a funded hardware startup company? Any conversations in that regard would be hugely welcomed and appreciated. And so I think I would just leave it with that open ask of anyone that might be able to help in that regard would be hugely helpful for me.
And the websites are pretty easy. Correct me if I'm wrong. CaringBand.com. So learn more about CaringBand, and also donationscout.com. Okay. And all right, pick your poison here. So any interesting factoids that maybe you haven't shared with folks, or that otherwise might be humorous, or maybe a reveal in the future of something that is unexpected that you're working on, again, in the spirit of I'll have you know, that you'd like to share?
Actually, I will. This is probably not what's customary, but I will tell you a story I heard recently that really resonated with me as a startup founder. It's a it's a it's a story about a woman named Florence Chadwick, and she was a competitive swimmer in the middle 1900s. I think she was the first woman that swam the English Channel in both directions, which obviously is a huge feat. One of her next challenges was swimming from Catalina Island to the coast of California. In these type of swimming, challenges, you can have people that trail you in boats, but they can't talk to you. They can't help you at all. They're really just there for safety. In this particular swim from Catalina, I think she was, I don't know, 14 or 15 hours into it, and a heavy fog set over the water, so much to where she lost senses and visibility, and ultimately she got back in the boat because she lost everything, right? Come to find out, she was a mile from shore, and how frustrating and devastating that would have been, knowing that you were almost there. So I heard that a few weeks ago, and that really resonated with me as kind of a startup, because a lot of times, like, you can't tell if you're on the 5-yard line about the score, or you're on the other 5-yard line. You've got the whole field to go. But what we do have is the ability to talk to people that have been where you are, so you can talk to those people on the boat. And so anyway, I heard that story, like I said, and it's really stuck with me. And I think about that in, especially being a solopreneur on the CaringBand side, lots of peaks and valleys. And so in those valleys, that's when I really challenge myself to talk to others, and it helps immensely. So
That's a beautiful story, Charlie, and you've shared many beautiful stories today. That's why I absolutely love talking to entrepreneurs. So I love what you're doing. We'll put the notes to your various efforts here in the podcast notes for people to access. So Charlie, I know there's so much that we could talk about today, but I have tremendous respect for what you're doing, how you're helping people and communities. And we need more people like you, man. So hats off to you. Kudos and great job, sir.
Appreciate that, David. And also thanks for having me. This was great.
This has been I'll Have You Know. Thanks for listening. You can find links and more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and leave us a comment while you're at it and let us know what you think. I'll Have You Know is a production of Rice Business and is sponsored by the Rice Business Alumni Board. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Christine Dobbin, and David Droogleever.